Chapter 4, focusing on the US and Spain. And our questions, in particular this chapter, dealing with what variables, what factors influence an individual's probability of doing three things: participating in politics offline, participating in politics online via Web 1.0, or participating in politics online via Web 2.0. Now, why do we separate these things? Well, theoretically, it's because we believe an individual's probability to engage in politics, the things that affect that probability, differ between, number one, the US and Spain, and number two, differ between online and offline, and number three, differ between how you participate online, Web 1.0 or Web 2.0. So we're interested to see what are those different factors in particular that make those differences come about. Those of you who've had comparative politics classes before, you might be familiar with what's known as the two-country case study. That's when you take two different countries, you look at their political systems, and you compare and contrast them to see the differences, but the similarities also, and to see what affects politics in one country. Do those things affect politics in a different country the same? That's what this chapter is, the US and Spain, but it's looking at it in a quantitative analysis way. So here we have our first analysis, looking at what affects offline political participation. And how do we measure that? We measure it by, have you signed a petition? Do you contact elected officials? And do you contribute to campaigns? Right, so doing any of those things in this chapter is considered offline political participation. Voting is not included in this. This is extremely important. Now, what about our independent variables? Which ones show up significant that actually affect our dependent variable? We have four of them: age, education, interest in politics, and the digital divide in Spain only. Now, age makes sense for us theoretically to be significant in both countries. What we tend to find is that older individuals, on average, engage in politics more in comparison to younger people. What's interesting is that we find the same thing in Spain. So we find age is a strong predictor in both countries. So we're starting to be able to take our assumptions and make them generalizable around the world. That's the point of comparative analysis. All right, then we see education once again, significant in both countries, not just the US, meaning that education, and probably as a proxy, income as well. Those with more education and income are more likely to participate in politics. Once again, spreading our generalizations. Interest in politics is almost always going to come up significant, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. We talked about it last chapter, and we'll mention it again in other chapters. But something interesting is the digital divide, and it only is significant in Spain. Now, why would the digital divide even come up whenever you're looking at offline political participation as your dependent variable? And very quickly, you should look to see how it's measured. And it is internet skills. It's basically saying those with more internet skills in Spain are more likely to participate in politics offline. Okay, well, why would that be? You need to think, as always with quantitative analysis, when looking at statistics, the time and the dates and the samples that are being used to get these implications, to get these findings. If you looked back in 2008 and 2007 in Spain, internet domestication rate was only about 50%. That's not very big. That means who likely were the individuals who had access to the internet? Probably those with more income, probably those with more education, probably those who were older. So this is really acting as another proxy for two of our other variables that are significant. So once again, always very important, don't just say, oh, the digital divide is significant in Spain. Look to see how it's measured, to see what we are really saying in these quantitative analysis. Now we look at what factors influence an individual's probability to participate in politics via Web 1.0 in the US and Spain. How do we measure this? Well, the same way that we measured offline participation, except for online. So signing a petition online, contacting a representative online, or contributing to a campaign online. And what variables become significant as far as influencing that? Well, real quick, the digital divide in both countries is a significant predictor. Meaning, the more tech skills you have in either country, the more likely you are to participate in politics via Web 1.0. That's really big. We were starting to talk about last chapter and the chapter before how the digital divide significantly impacts people's access to others. Here we're finding quantitative analysis that supports one of those 6 elements as far as tech skills go. Our next variable significant is interest in politics again, because if you're not interested in politics, you might have all the tech skills in the world, but you might be a gamer, and therefore you're not going to participate online in politics. Then we find another interesting one, but only in Spain, and that's age. It has a negative effect. So how do we interpret this? It means the older you are in Spain, the less likely you are to participate in politics Web 1.0. Now, we don't find this in the US. What does that tell us? Well, since age is also somewhat connected to the digital divide in Spain, as we saw in the previous slide, we have to start thinking about internet domestication rates. And what you find is if you look at the time frame, internet domestication rates in the US were much higher than they were in Spain. Meaning even older people in the US had more tech skills than older people in Spain. Therefore, as far as age goes, age in the US is not as big or not as significant when it comes to participating in online politics. That also is a major implication. That is saying as internet domestication grows around the world, that barrier should decrease. And we're going to talk about something very soon called the generational replacement gap and how that is affecting with age. And then our last one is education, but once again, only significant in Spain. This is saying as education increases in Spain, the more likely you are to participate in politics Web 1.0. Now, why would that be significant in Spain and not the US? It once again could have something to do with being connected to tech skills. It could very well be that in Spain, education and those who attain higher education are some of the only ones who get higher tech skills. Meaning, we could have an issue of multicollinearity in this regression analysis. And again, we're not going to jump into what that means again just yet, but every time it comes up, I want to bring it up. Because you should not necessarily be skeptical of every piece of statistic that you see, but you should be aware of potential flaws, and you should be wise to them, and you should think, how are these variables measured? And one of our chapters this week, we are going to look specifically at, and we're going to get a little bit into the weeds of good versus bad regression analysis. Now we look at the probability of an individual participating in politics via Web 2.0. And how is this measured? It's measured as a single component, yes, no. Have you or do you comment on blogs? Do you interact with people in political forums? Right, so this is very, very different than Web 1.0, where it's just one person that way. Here, multi-directional flow of information. You are actually conversing online with people about politics. So what factors influence a person's probability to do this in Spain or the US? Well, we see the digital divide comes up again. As far as tech skills, the more tech skills you have, the more likely you are to do this, because you do not have a barrier keeping you from doing it. Interest in politics matters again. And in age, as a negative effect in Spain, matters again. But something else doesn't matter. And that's also something we should be really focusing on when we look at regression analysis. Not only what variables are significant, but which ones are not. And in this one, education disappears. Now, why would education disappear and not be a significant predictor? Perhaps it is the very nature of the form of political participation. The fact that you were going back and forth with different people. You were public. You were in the eye for everyone to see. For many people, politics are a very personal thing. They have a rule at dinner. Don't talk what? Don't talk politics, don't talk religion. You meet new people. What do they say? Don't talk politics, don't talk religion. Perhaps this is quantitative analysis showing that there are a lot of people out there in the world who do not want to interact on the internet, talking to people about politics. They might be fine contributing to a campaign, writing a letter to a representative, signing a petition, but they don't actually want to converse with people about it. Perhaps this was foretelling of trolls. Trolls coming out. People don't want to be caught up in a troll war over politics. So therefore, education has nothing to do with it. This also has to do with something that we're going to look at in one of our upcoming chapters about types of institutional versus non-institutional forms of participation. And we'll see if this comes up again as well. Now, let's think about, does this research matter? Does knowing what affects the probability of participating in politics in the US and Spain, offline, online, online 2.0, does knowing those factors matter? And the short answer would be yes. Because if you know what variables influence a person's probability of participating in politics in any way, then if you're in a democracy, you can work on those variables to increase a person's probability of participating. You can theoretically increase participation rates in a country. And if democracy is government about the people, by the people, then you should want higher rates of participation. And as those rates of participation increase, democracy, once again, theoretically, should become a truer representation of these people who are actually participating. Policy outcomes will mirror more of the actual population of a country. So all in all, by using this kind of quantitative analysis, by focusing on specific variables like education, like interest in politics, like getting rid of the digital divide, if you can focus on those three things, you can, through the different chains that I went through, increase the quality of your democracy overall in Spain and the US. And what else this does is it shows us that these variables are generalizable between these two cases, meaning perhaps these variables are generalizable in other countries as well. Something we'll have to try and test for and see if that holds true. Now, whether you want change or you like the way the government is today, whether you like the status quo, that really doesn't matter when you think about the utility of this research. And the simple fact is the utility of this research is increasing, increasing, increasing. Why? Because the world is becoming more domesticated with the internet. Internet domestication rates globally are skyrocketing. Some places slower than others, but overall they are increasing. And even if you don't want political change to happen in your country, authoritarian leaders all around the world look at this kind of research and say, so I need to make sure these variables don't increase, that way people don't want to participate. Interesting. So you mean I can keep my education low? I can make sure the barriers for the digital divide don't disappear? I can make sure people aren't interested in politics? And if I do those things, their probability for participating will decrease. That's a pretty scary thought. Authoritarian regimes all around the world have been looking at this research and using it, just like our own politicians have. Why do you think you have stuff like the Great Firewall of China? Why does China spend so much time and resources and money to block off the rest of the world's internet from its population? Because they know about research like this. They know about the potential for change. So yes, this research definitely matters moving forward. And we'll jump into more and more around the world how people actually use it.